Is humanity in crisis today?
That unless we change the way we think about ourselves, unless we change our trajectory, we are most probably the last generation of pure humans this world will ever know. There is a concerted effort that is happening now, and we'll see this for the next 5 years until the year 2030, to replace our humanness, to replace our biology with technology. The old idea of a battle is that there are opposing forces and that there has to be a fight. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something more on a deeply spiritual level. We don't want to win this battle. We want to triumph. And the way we triumph is...
Are you ready to shine? Shine bright. Woo-hoo! Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wondered why there's so much chaos, crisis, and change in the world today, then do we have the Pure Human Show for you. Today, I'll be talking with world-renowned scientist and best-selling author Gregg Braden about his latest book, Pure Human, Transhumanism, and the 5,000-year cycle we're going through. So welcome back to the show, Gregg. Are you ready to shine?
I am. I've been shining all morning, ready for you. I've been looking forward to this all week, Michael. It's good to see you. When was the last time we were together? It's been a few months.
It's been a few months. I think we were in Quebec at that time. And now we're down in Florida, and apparently the Quebec cold has followed us a little bit. So you see me in my ski jacket today, although certainly nothing to complain about. But yeah, it's been a few months, and has the world been changing fast?
Yeah, it's a very, very different world that we're seeing now. I am coming to you from our little studio just outside of Santa Fe, New
Yeah.
Mexico. It may be colder where you are than where I am. I don't know. So, yeah,
Well, let me.
the yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, before we dive into all of this, forgive me for saying, is humanity in crisis today?
It's all a matter of perspective. There is a process that's unfolding, and it's how we see that process, Michael, that determines whether or not we're in crisis or not. And you mentioned a new book. I do have a new book. The title of the book is called Pure Human,
Yep.
and that's exactly what it's about. The best minds of our time are telling us right now that unless we change the way we think about ourselves, unless we change our trajectory, we are most probably the last generation of pure humans that this world will ever know. There is a concerted effort that is happening now, and we'll see this for the next 5 years until the year 2030, a concerted effort to replace our humanness, to replace our biology with technology. So we're talking about computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, sensors under the skin, nano sensors running through the circulatory system. And while the marketing for these technologies is deceptively sexy, I mean, they're making it look really good, and not many people are talking about the downside of the price that we are being asked to pay to embrace this technology into our bodies. That's what this book is all about.
So I can't believe I'll go there right away. And I'm somebody who's embraced a lot of these technologies. I was supposed to be part of a study on blood sugar with a chip under the skin. Just missed out on getting that done in time. I do have many, many titanium parts. But what you're talking about is, ooh, you actually mentioned it briefly on a previous show, and I didn't go there. And my audience called me. You're talking at a battle of good versus evil. And you mentioned in this book, you break it down step by step. You talk about how the the UN and another organization are working together with a, oh, geez, dare I say, global mandate toward this.
Yeah, well, since we just went there, let me ask this. How deep do you want to go, Michael? How deep can we go?
I want you to go as deep as you can where people can hold on to their seats. if and only as you promise me at the end that we talk about the choice we can make and how that can empower us, because I need to bring this back to
Oh yeah.
understanding the true technology, the inner technology. So go deep, Gregg, go for it.
Yeah, it does no good to have the conversation if we can't bring it back to that place. So I'm assuming that we'll probably have people watching this that were not watching the previous episode.
Yes.
And if they were, just to summarize, we are, people look at the world right now, and I think it's obvious it's not business as usual. Even the people that used to push back and say, "Oh, we've seen all this before," they're saying, "Wow, what's going on?" It looks like the world's coming apart at the seams for no apparent reason, and that the events that we're seeing, whether we're talking about wars or climate change or social change or financial breakdowns or whatever it is, they look like they're spontaneous, like they're just popping off all over the place for no apparent reason. There is a reason, there is a structure, and I'm a scientist. I'm a degreed earth scientist with a very strong background in math, physics, and computer science. Most of my adult career was in the computer science side of the earth sciences.
Do you know I have a master's in computers?
No, I don't know that. So we could have a
So
whole
we,
conversation. Well, we could
oh
have a whole
yes.
conversation on the new quantum chip that was just released this last 2 weeks. So, as a scientist, I'm a systems thinker,
Mhm.
and I like to look at the big picture and then go down to the nanosecond of my life to see where it fits in that big picture. And with your permission, Michael, I think that might be the best way to approach the question you asked and the topic of the book, if you're okay with doing it that way.
Please, absolutely.
There is a fundamental force that is driving everything that we see, every event that we see in the world, bar none, and that we have seen throughout history. And maybe the best way to start with that is just to describe a discovery that was made 1946 in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I know I love being on your program because you have a very informed audience. And I know many of them are very familiar. I don't want to be redundant with a lot of this. For those that aren't, the Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest records of the Old Testament known to exist. But what makes them so special is that they're the oldest unedited records of the Old Testament. And they push the date of the Old Testament back about 1,000 years. Well, and you can't make this stuff up. There were 11 caves that were discovered in 1946. It was in the first cave and the first vase that was found in the first cave. These scrolls are stored in vases 2.5, 3 feet tall. They're not like little pickle jars, they're big vases. It was in the first cave and the first vase and the first scroll that was pulled out of that vase that holds the key to understanding what's happening in our lives today. Now, interestingly, 1946 is when it was discovered. There was an effort to prevent it from being released to the public until 1991.
Wow.
You have to say what could possibly be in the 2,500-year-old scroll that would warrant the Vatican and nations from spending the time, energy, and money to prevent this from being made public.
Yeah.
And the answer is in the first scroll. The first scroll is called the War Scroll, WAR,
Yeah.
and it describes an ancient battle, Michael. It's ancient, it's not obsolete. It began when the first of our kind emerged mysteriously in this world, and it is ongoing today. It is the actual words are that this is a battle between what's called the sons of darkness and the sons of light. Now, I was in a live program last weekend, and there was a woman in the audience who felt very offended and excluded because it didn't say anything about women. 2,500 years ago, they were not talking about gender the way we are today.
Yeah.
Feminine and masculine were inclusive in sons of man. It is talking about the human species.
Yeah.
So this fundamental battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light, we know that battle today is a battle between good and evil.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. A lot of people. I was born in Missouri, right in the middle of this big, beautiful country of ours, in a rural northern Missouri. And, we talk about good and evil sometimes, but there's always kind of a joke. There was a little red devil on the shoulder that had, a pitchfork and a pointy tail and horns and an angel. And they're having this conversation back and forth. And we used to joke about it. Evil is very real, and it is disguised in ways today that sometimes people don't recognize. There are different kinds of evil. There's biological evil, there's technological evil, there is emotional evil, psychological evil. There's kinetic evil playing out on the battlefields of Ukraine and Israel. What happened at the music festival? Different kinds of evil that are playing out in our lives today. But the goal of the evil, Michael, is what this new book is all about, and it's what our conversation is going to be about. That goal is to deny us access to our divinity, to human divinity. So now let's define divinity, and this may come as a surprise for some people.
Can I back you up for one sec?
Yeah, sure.
Would you define evil?
We're going to.
Okay.
We're going to, because we have to define divinity first.
I like it.
Yeah. So divinity, a lot of people, that it's a tricky word. And in my genre, a lot of people don't like to use it. They don't like for me to use it because it comes with baggage, often linked with religion. There's schools of divinity, that make that connection. But when you look at the definition of divinity, this is a mind blower. It's simply, divinity is our ability to transcend perceived limitations. That's
Amen.
it. Transcend, to become more than, and I love this next part, perceived. The limitations that we place upon ourselves and that we define to be the possibilities in our lives may not even be real. They are the perceived limitations from our family, our culture, our society, from false science, from religion, all kinds of things. So our divinity is our ability not to just deal with it, but to transcend, to become more than the challenges that life brings to our doorstep. Examples of divinity: our ability to imagine, our ability to create, our ability to innovate, our ability to love, our ability to forgive, empathy, sympathy, compassion, our ability to heal. These are all expressions of divinity. Divinity is where we find our power, at least in these bodies, in this realm on earth. Divinity is where we find our power. Divinity is what frees us from fear. All right, that's going to be really important. When we talk about evil, evil has many, many expressions, many faces, but let's create a benchmark so that we can, a yardstick, so that we can define what evil is. Evil is anything that denies us our divinity, anything that prevents us from the deepest expression of our human capacities, of healing our own bodies, of loving without fear, forgiving without expectation, of imagining and creating and innovating and being able to share with another human what we have imagined and created in our minds. Those are forms of evil. And now that we have that, now we can talk about where we are in the world today. This fundamental battle between good and evil is rearing its ugly head because there's an expiration date, apparently, to this battle. And we're looking at the year 2030, next 5 years. And there are organizations, there are individuals, there are powers, there are forces that want to remake the world within these next 5 years into something that we've never seen before. But what makes now so very different is not only do they want to remake the world around us, they want to make the world different inside of us. And for the first time in 10,000 generations of human existence, that's how long we've been here, we have the technology now to re-engineer inside of us to make us something very, very different than we are presently. And if we succumb to those innovations, we lose access to our divinity. Evil prevails. Evil, once again, is anything that denies or veils our access to our divinity.
would you say evil is a a separation from knowing who we are, a forgetfulness of knowing who we are, what we are? What is it that makes something evil? Is it not knowing that we are divine,
Well,
that we are?
the not knowing originated as a form of evil because we have been deceived for so very long. The act of deceiving a human soul from its potential is a form of evil, of leading a human soul to believe that it is a powerless victim of the world out there. And if you're a victim and you're powerless, you need something to save you. And that savior is being touted as technology. And young people are very, very vulnerable to this because they're being told that we are all products, at least since the end of World War II. So for multiple generations, there's been a concerted effort to denigrate the human body, to the human body from a scientific perspective. And our young kids are being taught this in public schools in America. I don't know about other countries, but in America, that carbon-based life in general
Mhm.
and human life specifically, we are a form of carbon-based life, that we are flawed by our very nature. And among our flaws that are identified are things like human emotion, because emotion clouds our logic and clouds our thinking and clouds our ability to make choices. Among our flaws are empathy, sympathy, compassion. And I'll tell you, the military is all in on this, because when you have a man or a woman in the battlefield who is engrossed in empathy for their opponent
Of
or
course.
compassion, from a military perspective, they become less effective. I personally cherish our ability to have empathy and sympathy and compassion. I wouldn't want to be part of a species that doesn't have that.
That's emotion, energy in motion. This is our vehicle that transcends time and space. This is our connection. This is the carrier wave of everything to the other side, from the other side. That's our everything.
It is everything. So there is a couple of things here. There's an author, a scientist, a futurist. His name is Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you've ever interviewed him. He is an author. He's a futurist. What many people may know him. He is in some capacity. He was director of engineering at Google, engineering artificial intelligence. Right now, this month, I don't know exactly what his capacity is in Google. He came out with a book earlier this year called The Singularity, very controversial book. And what he's saying in The Singularity is by the year 2030, when we talk to someone on the street or in the grocery store, there we won't be talking to a pure human. We will be talking to some hybrid of biology machine interface. And honestly, Michael, I don't think titanium rods or the anything like that, those aren't the kinds of things we're talking about. The technology that actually replaces the human functions. But he takes us further. He says by the year 2045, which is not far away, and your kids are going to be the ones that are mostly influenced, that generation. He said by the year 2045, we will all be part of what is called the singularity. And there are a lot of scientists that are talking about this now. This is the digitization of our planet. Every form of life, every example of every form of life, every elephant, every giraffe, every fish in the ocean, we have the ability to digitize them and give them an ID number. I mean, that's every tree and every forest, every human on the face of the earth, and the way we live, what we consume, where we travel, what we spend, what we think, what our feelings and perceptions and biometrics are, will be part of a massive database that is governed by a massive AI that is being built right now. And this
This
is this is
sounds,
called
you first.
go ahead. No,
Well, this
this is
sounds like
called this is called the singularity. This is what's called the singularity. I'm pushing back on all of this. I love technology to serve us, but not to enslave us. and the divinity and this fundamental battle between good and evil. The ultimate battle is where we have surrendered our humanness, where we surrender our divinity to something outside of us. We're still alive, but we've lost the very characteristics and qualities that we cherish as a species. And once they're gone, Michael, we can't get them back. There are biological reasons, genetic reasons why you can't go back.
How is this different? And I don't want to take you off your train, but how is this different than the Matrix in many ways? We are now really creating a whole new level of Matrix. And then the computer geek in me goes, where's the computational power that will be able to put, and the energy behind that computational power that'll be able to pull this off?
Well, we're talking, first of all, the network, this could not happen without a network that covers every square centimeter of the face of the earth. And Starlink is doing just that. There are literally, I don't know, something like 40,000 satellites
Mhm.
that will be deployed. There's over 20,000 right now that are deployed for Starlink. And you know, here's the thing. I'll be clear. I'm a scientist, and I've seen this in scientific conversations. The discoveries, the technology is not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's the thinking that underlies how it's applied in our lives. So a perfect example. Let me just offer an example. The FDA just approved computer chips to be implanted in the human brain that allow that person to interface directly with a hard drive of the computer by thinking without touching a keyboard, without any kind of wires or cables or anything like that. All right. Now, what kind of a technology is this? If you're a man or woman who has given your life in service to your country in the battlefield on the other side of the planet, and in your service, you've lost arms and legs, and you come home, and we now have robotic prosthetics that could replace the arms and legs, and you've got a computer chip in your brain that will talk to that prosthetic and allow you to hold your baby in your arms and brush your own teeth and feed your own face and comb your own hair. Man, what a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Oh yeah.
On an individual basis, the proposals that are the policies that are being written are to place those computer chips in the brain of newborns before they leave the hospital, to give them the advantage and the competitive edge in the world that's emerging. There's a big difference between case by case usage and applying it in mass. And this is what we're up against here.
Forgive me, and I really want to keep you on your train. I read an article coming out of AccuWeather, of all places, 2 days ago, that drove me completely berserkoid mad. That's a technical term, berserkoid mad. It was, if I get this title right, cyberborg cockroaches. That they were breeding cockroaches, that then they did a simple surgical, in quotes, procedure and fused, because I had a friend who worked behind the scenes on nano mosquitoes for going into earthquake victims and finding them this way. And so I'm like, oh, this is coming out to the public. And I'm like, no. They're wiring a cockroach with a chip so that the cockroach is forced to do what the operator wants, a live cockroach. And the scientist said, well, you don't have to worry about any ethical dilemmas or concerns because there is no scientific proof that shows that cockroaches carry consciousness.
Well, that's a whole different conversation. But what you're
Holy
saying,
crap.
yeah, what you're saying is true. I mean, the intelligence agencies have been able to do this on flies, on cockroaches. They use them in meteorology. There are all kinds of applications. Uh, the ones that they're talking about in the human body, to become part of this internet of all things, are the nanosensors that run through the circulatory system that broadcast our biometrics.
Yep.
So they not only broadcast heart rate variability and blood pressure and
Yep.
glucose levels and all that, but they broadcast emotional responses. And those emotional responses,
Danger.
if you're being told to follow a policy and your emotional response is that I'm not going to do that, even if you say with words, I will, if your emotions don't want to, that's all recorded in that database. And now you are a problem citizen. I mean, these are the kinds of things, these are the concerns that are happening.
How real is that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's
well,
like the
from
movie Minority Report.
it
Sorry.
is, it is. And I talk about this in the new book. From my perspective, I mean, there are all kinds of applications we could talk about. My concern,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to this fundamental battle between good and evil. Our divinity is the product of whatever it is that happened that allowed us to emerge on this planet 200,000 years ago. We showed up 200,000 years ago. The truth is, we don't know where we came from. Darwin's idea of evolution breaks down when it comes to humans. What we do know as scientists
Yeah.
is that we are the product of these very unnatural mutations.
Yeah.
Human chromosome 2 that gave us the neocortex, the ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion. Chromosome 7 that allows us complex speech and allows us to sing. No other form of life can do that. And these other things, these cannot happen naturally. There is some intervention of some kind, and they all happened at the same time. They didn't happen slowly, gradually over a long period of time. Our own DNA studies are now telling us this. So what that says to me as a scientist
Yeah.
is, number one, that we're the product of some form of intervention. I have to say, some kind of intelligent intervention. Who or what that is, it's a whole different conversation. It brings us into ancient civilizations and indigenous cultures and the congressional hearings on disclosure of our relationship to life beyond this world. It's a whole conversation. But the point is, we were given the gift of our humanness. And it is through our humanness that we were given access to these God-like features that we call divinity. Remember the definition, the ability to transcend perceived limitations. The goal of evil is to deny us access to our divinity, to keep us in fear, to keep us sick, to keep us stuck so that we are vulnerable and susceptible to the ideas and the agendas of others. And there's no shortage of ideas and agendas out there. The United Nations, World Economic Forum, and our previous conversations identify some of those agendas. They want them in place within 5 years. The only way to accomplish that is to change our world. And you are seeing, beginning in January of 25, you will see attempts to massively shift and socially engineer our societies and our bodies in ways that we've never seen. And we're going to be inundated, encouraged, strongly encouraged, enticed with really sexy marketing that makes it look like if we accept these technologies into our bodies, life will be easier, we will be safer, and we'll be healthier. Those are the three things they're going to target. Now, I'm aware of this, and I'm still in awe when I see this marketing. Man, they make it look really, really good. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, Sweden is ahead of the curve on this, and their population is readily accepting RFID into their bodies for corporate and for social and financial reasons. So there was one of the advertisements, the
Yep.
marketing. Here's a guy. He's walking down the street. The birds are singing. The sky is blue.
Of
He
course.
says he's never felt freer in his life. He has
Oh,
15 RFID chips in his body. When he gets into his car, one of those chips starts his car. One of them opens the door to his office. One of them works the ATM. One of them pays for his groceries. He's never felt freer when, in truth, he has never had less freedom because he is completely linked in and susceptible to the grid that is connecting all of those RFID chips that can be accepted or denied on a social level. But physiologically, here's the thing.
yeah,
In biology, there's a principle in biology, Michael, it's called use it or lose it. And
absolutely.
And what it means is that when a biological system is no longer, when no demand is placed on a biological system,
Mhm.
after a period of time, that system will begin to atrophy, and it will stop to function because the body feels, because it's not being used, it's no longer needed. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. Um, when I was in school in the 1950s and the 1960s, the thinking at that time was that when we are born into this world, we have a finite number of brain cells.
Mhm.
And the joke in college, this was the leverage in college, was don't drink another beer, because if you drink the beer, you're going to kill brain cells, and you've only got, you've only got a fixed number to start with. Now we know that's not true. It's not a reason to drink beer, but we know it's not true because what the new science is showing is that we're producing new brain cells until the last breath that we take, the last breath of life.
Ooh.
They come from a part of the brain, the hippocampus, but there's a catch. And the catch is this: if we do not engage those new neurons in a meaningful way, within about 7 days, within about a week, they will atrophy and they will die
Yeah.
because the body feels that they're not needed. That principle applies throughout the human body. It applies to the immune system. It applies to the reproductive system. It applies to the way that our bodies, the way cells reproduce and function.
Yeah.
This is the drawback people are not being told. When you replace the biology, put a computer chip and AI into the brain, it begins to do the functions that the brain used to do. And so the brain says, well, maybe you don't need these cells anymore.
Yeah.
And there are actually studies. There's studies there. This has been around long enough. Virtual reality visors.
Yeah.
They have young kids, 3 years old.
Mhm.
They have breakfast. They eat Captain Crunch, or whatever it is
Oh
that they
God.
that they have for breakfast. Their parents sit them in the living room
Yeah.
and put on an AI visor to entertain them for 3 or 4 hours during the day.
Yeah.
And the parents go do their thing. And I'm not saying that parents are bad people, because they don't know this impact. What the studies are showing is that with prolonged usage, once or twice a week isn't going to do this,
Yeah.
but day after day after day, week after week, what happens is there's an impairment in that the child, first of all, physically, the child is impaired. Their bodies they're underweight. Their muscles atrophy because they're not using them, because they're sitting there being entertained. Their cognitive abilities, their socialization skills, their problem solving abilities, their communication skills, all have declined. And what's really interesting, there's a part of their brain that actually grows thicker, and it is called the visual cortex.
Yeah.
And it's not surprising, because look at what's happening. They are watching scenes and hearing sounds and seeing
Mhm.
colors that they would never see with their friends in the backyard. And but the thing is, it's all being done for them. They are observing. Now, I have a younger brother, 4 years younger.
Yeah.
We were kids. We would take a blanket out of the closet in the living room, and we drape it over 2 chairs. And now we've got a tent. All right.
Yes.
But not just any tent. Our tent was a remote outpost on a distant planet, and we were explorers, and we'd wear our raincoat to be the radiation suit that would protect us. And,
Oh God.
it's crazy. But the whole point, we were using our imagination. And what's happening with these young kids is everything is being done for them. They're not using their imagination. They're watching everything happen. And there's a physiological effect. Now, there's the flip side. Because of epigenetics, those young kids, they can reverse all of those cognitive debilitating effects just by beginning to use their bodies. So it's for them, if they catch it in time, it's not going to last. So, but this is the point. If the brain is being entertained and is not
Yeah.
being creative and imaginative, it's the same thing as having that computer chip in the brain, and that is true for the whole body. And we're looking at an entire generation now that's being encouraged to do this. And in doing so, they are actually denying access to their own human divinity. Now, they may not use that language, but that's precisely what it is that's happening.
Would you say that humans are, hmm, scary term, rabbit hole, by design, we are or were until this agenda takes place, living, breathing antennas?
Well, we are. We are. This is where the new science comes in. All up until about 5 years ago,
Yeah,
Michael, the scientists looking at the human body were
yeah,
thinking in terms of biology, as we've been conditioned to do. So all the discoveries, they were published in biology books. About 5 years ago, this began to change, and scientists began, and some medical professionals began to look at the human body not from a biology perspective, but from an IT, information technology
yeah,
perspective. And they began publishing what they discovered not in biology books, but in these very technical, obscure engineering journals, IEEE, for example. And
yeah.
so for example, there is a journal called the Journal of Advanced Computing Technology, I think is the name of it, Advanced Computing Science or Computing Technology. And it was in that journal. It's in the book, so I have it referenced in the book. They published the discovery that human DNA, literally, this isn't a metaphor, it literally is a fractal antenna. Now, what does that mean? We all know that an antenna tunes to a signal. A fractal antenna, by nature of it being a fractal, it is tuning to multiple signals simultaneously across a big bandwidth of information. And the same thing is true with neurons in the human body. So can I share with you, can I share a quick experiment? I haven't talked about this on any interviews, and it's, well,
Oh, goody.
not any interviews recently. Yeah, this is really interesting. So the experiment was done in it was done in 2022,
Yeah,
and it was done by a research organization in Northern California associated with Stanford. I'm not saying it was Stanford. They were under the auspices, I think, of Stanford. So what they did was this. Now, I mean, even to design this experiment tells you that somebody is thinking way differently about the human body. So here's what they did. They took neurons
yeah,
that were not attached to a human and they put them into a petri dish and kept them alive.
yeah.
And they designed a special computer chip that had ports so that the little dendrites, the little tentacles, the arms on the neurons would fit into the port on the chip. So now you have a biology technology interface, okay?
Okay.
Then they took that chip and they put it into a computer that was loaded with one of the first video games that came out in 1972. It was a game called Pong,
Yeah.
Pong.
Oh, yeah, I
Now,
remember
yeah, well, I do too. And
it.
people today, it's so primitive compared to the real game, the virtual reality of our games today. Pong was essentially a tennis a tennis game where the little cursor was going boom, 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 and you'd move your cursor to hit, and people would spend hours watching this. Okay, so here's the thing: they hooked these neurons up to a computer that was loaded with a game of Pong, and the neurons knew how to play the game. And the longer the neurons played, they learned and got better at the game. And now the scientists are left with a question: how do neurons not connected to a human in a petri dish know how to play the game of Pong? Where are the instructions for the game of Pong? Are they inside the neurons? Well, the answer is no. And so they go back to the statement that you just made just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
What the experiment is suggesting, that is a mind blower to the scientists, but it's what you and your guests and me, we've talked about non-scientifically.
Yes.
is this, that the neurons are, the information isn't in the neurons, that the neurons are biological antenna that are tuned to the place in the field that underlies all existence, the field of energy that holds information, and that those neurons are tuned to that place in the field and are making access of that connection to play the game of Pong. The implications are vast because it says that for that game, the information is the field and the neurons are tuning to that. It means in life for us, our memories
Yeah.
have long been known not to exist in our brain. There were studies, the holographic brain. David Bohm, the physicist, did experiments with this. Carl Pribram, the neuroscientist, they've got very technical papers published on this. But our memories are not in our bodies; they're in the field, and our biology is what links us to our memories. Now, this is important because it means divinity, our imagination, our creativity, all of the things that we attribute to our humanness are in the field, and it's through our biology that we link to those. When we replace the biology with machines, we lose access to that information. That is a form of evil. That is a denial of our ability to access our humanness.
Let me take things 10 steps, uh, a leap 10 steps that may or may not take place. But I have heard that consciousness for the first time has been moved or put into something else. I don't know if that's true or not. And the question becomes, could Michael be taken from Michael and be put something else and then disconnected from the source?
Probably not. And this is, I talk about this in the book. So, first of all, the movement to replace our biology with technology is called the transhuman movement.
Yes.
Trans means beyond. So, we talk about transgender, it means beyond gender. Transhuman, beyond human. The, the ultimate goal of the transhumanist movement is immortality. And they believe, and there are papers and books written on this, they believe that what they think is consciousness can be captured as ones and zeros and stored
That's what
on a
I'm talking
computer
about.
chip. Yeah, we are not the ones and zeros. Okay, we are more than the ones and zeros.
Yeah.
Our everything is already conscious to some degree. There are different levels of consciousness. A rock has a level of consciousness. It's not our level of consciousness. The tree behind you is conscious.
Yeah.
So, what the part that they're missing, and this is probably how they'll figure it out, is that we don't live in the ones and zeros,
Yeah.
and this is the part of us. Our divinity is the part of us that is ancient. It is timeless. It is all knowing. It's I had the opportunity to go to the Grammys. My wife is a voting member of the Grammys,
Cool.
uh, and a Grammy nominated musician. She invited me to go with
Yeah.
her to the Grammys a couple of years. It was the year that they were held in New York rather
Okay.
than LA. Usually it's only happened a couple of times and they were in New York. And of course I went and I took advantage of the opportunity. Every musician that I met in the after events and all the side concerts and everything, I would ask the same question. I'd say, where did the music come from
Yeah.
that just won you that Grammy? Or where did the words, the amazing words of that song come from? And Michael, every one of them told me exactly the same thing. Everyone said it didn't come from me. It came through me. They said I had to get out of the way to
Amen.
allow it to come through. I'm a guitar player since I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
One of my heroes is Stephen Vai. Steve Vai, he's an amazing guitarist. Um, One of the most powerful pieces of music he ever wrote. It's called "For the Love of God." He had fasted for about 30 days. And at the end of that fast, this song came through in less than 10 minutes. The point is, he didn't labor over creating this amazing instrumental. And you hear it in movies all the time. It's a very powerfully, emotionally evocative piece of music. He didn't labor for days creating and perfecting it. He says it came through in about 10 minutes. It was right there. And these are examples of divinity. When you talk to an artist about a painting or a sculptor or a dancer, or when you write a book, you're in the middle of writing books right now, and I'm just finished this book. Where does that come from? Well, we can labor to create them, or we can allow the inspiration to come, that divine inspiration. These are all expressions of human divinity.
Yeah.
So, so once again, now we have a benchmark for evil. The evil is to deny or veil our access to our divinity. We have been deceived as beings in this world, and the deception is ancient as well. And we continue to be deceived into thinking that we are our bodies. We're not.
Mm-hmm.
We inhabit the bodies, but we are not our bodies. And that this is all there is, and that we are powerless victims. And so we need something outside of ourselves. The deception is a form of evil. And where you really get into this, if people want to know more about this, the Dead Sea Scrolls, oldest records of the Old Testament, 1946-47. The oldest records of the New Testament were found a year earlier, 1945, not in the Holy Lands per se, but in a village along the Nile in Egypt, a little village called Nag Hammadi. And it is the Gnostic texts of the Nag Hammadi library
Yeah.
that were the oldest records of the New Testament. So within just a few years, revealed to the world, and I think it's no accident, were the oldest and most complete records of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions underlying today's Buddhism, underlying today's Christianity, Judaism, and Islamic traditions. This is where they all stem from these texts.
So looking at this and then looking at, I bring it, I don't know, full circle because we're still diving down the rabbit hole, but you mentioned Starlink as having this network. I think it was to the centimeter or to the nanometer even of being covered. And what you bring up in the book, sorry, Elon, Neuralink. Can you dive down that rabbit hole then?
Well, we just did. Neuralink is the computer chip in the human brain. You know, Elon Musk made an interesting statement recently. So for our viewers that may not be familiar with this conversation,
Yes.
Elon Musk has pioneered a lot of good technology, and I'm not saying he's a bad man. He's a techie, and
Yeah.
he's going to push that tech as far as he can until somebody pushes back, until somebody reels it in. And I don't know him personally. I don't know his motivations.
Yeah.
He's doing some amazing things that can be really good and they can be really bad. And it depends on where we go. So Neuralink um, is the first computer chip, and the way it works is okay. Currently, the way it works
Yes.
is there's a hole about the size of a nickel that is made in the skull. So it's the skull. The skull is sawed.
Yep.
That little piece of bone comes out,
Yep.
and there's a place between the bottom of the skull and the top of the brain. There's actually a space. The brain doesn't push right up against the bone, and it's in that space that the Neuralink chip is resting. And then it's got 1024 tiny sensors
Yep.
that go down into the neocortex, to different levels into the neocortex, and they're picking up uh, the the uh, the information from the synapses. They come up, those 1024 little sensors, they come up to the chip. The chip processes the information, and then through a Bluetooth like technology, I'm not saying it is Bluetooth, but it works that way, it is transmitted to the hard drive of an external computer. Now, someone asked Elon Musk recently at a press conference, they said, do you think people, because the FDA has approved this, the FDA approved this in 2023. So there was someone that asked him, they said, do you think people are really going to go for having a part of their brain skull removed to do this? And Elon says, oh, you don't have to do that anymore. He said, now you can do this with nano circuits circulating in the body. So now we can have nano circuits circulating in the circulatory system that are essentially picking up information from the brain and apparently through the blood-brain barrier, they're able to cross, and then they're able to transmit that information. So this is the example I gave earlier. If you're powering a prosthetic, it could be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
To be embedded into every newborn that emerges on the planet to tie in to the grid that is out there in a single generation, I think personally, I believe that's a form of evil.
So let's go from there to the Milarepa caves and then to the Great Reset, because I wanted people to understand just how much more powerful we are and how much our soft technology, you call it, is the most powerful game going on before we talk about it being shut off.
Yeah, well, so the flip side, so the book Pure Human has two parallel themes.
Yes.
One theme is the awareness that there's a concerted effort to replace our biology with technology and the implications of what that means. That's part of the book.
Yeah.
Second part of the book is that the new science is telling us that in many cases we meet and even exceed the capacity of the very technology that we're being asked to accept into our bodies. So let me give some examples of that, and then we'll talk about Milarepa and those other things. I mean, this is, and I already mentioned that one of the big breakthroughs is the willingness to look at us as from an IT perspective rather than from a biological perspective.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking of the human body as an information processor, and you say, well, how could that be? Because we're soft, wet, sticky, gooey, mushy stuff. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. We're not a hard technology like a silicon chip and a wire and a cable and a sensor. We're more than that. We're human. We are neurons and cell membranes and ion potentials moving across cell walls. And here's the beautiful thing. I worked in the defense industry during the Cold War years.
Yeah.
And I had access to the most advanced technology, SDI, for example, Star Wars Defense Initiative, advanced lasers, communications, radar systems, you name it. And one of the things I learned is that the more complex a system is behind the scenes, the simpler the user interface. We are a complex system, so complex that we have a very simple user interface. I mean, a mobile phone is a perfect example. You touch a picture with your finger and you set into motion a whole cascade of events that pay your bills and talk to your friends, and all you did was, touch a picture. Our user interface is so simple. It is thought, feeling, emotion, belief, breath, focus, nutrition, and movement. And these are the core principles of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions. We are so sophisticated, we don't have to know how we work. We can, and I think it's good to know, but you don't have to know all of these things. So what the science is showing now, the average human has about 50 trillion cells. We talked about this, I think, in our last interview. Every cell, scientists now know, and this is the metaphor, every cell creates a tiny charge of electricity, about 0.07 volts. That's a low voltage, but you do the math, 0.07 times 50 trillion, and you're talking about 3.5 billion volts of electrical potential, 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential per human. And I mean, what if we could harness
quite the
that?
battery.
Well, if we could direct it to our own healing or to our intuition, but it doesn't stop there, because every cell is a gated circuit. It's got input, output. We have the equivalent of transistors, resistors, capacitors. We emit photons of light
Hmm.
and we receive photons of light. Light is information. So we are emitting information into the field and receiving information. The DNA, as we said, is a fractal antenna that is tuned in to something. Our neurons are fractal antenna. Here, I'll stop. I'll do one more and then I'll stop because we go on and on with this.
I love this stuff.
The what scientists have found is that the way DNA stores information, I'm going to use three terms, and I bet your viewers are familiar with this because of a new technology that's emerging in the world today.
Yeah.
Every successful genetic transaction in the human species is recorded into our genome. It is transparent.
Yeah.
So anybody that knows how to read it, all you need is a computer and the right software. You can read the DNA. It's transparent. It is immutable because it is distributed. We have 8 billion human nodes in this system. So you might change it in one individual, but you haven't changed it in the system. And it is secure. And if that sounds familiar, if you're thinking about a system where information is transparent, immutable, and secure, that is the basis of blockchain technology that is revolutionizing decentralized finance and information storage. It's modeled after human DNA because we are so successful. So the point of all of this is that we're not, we've been told, we're more than we've been led to believe. We are soft technology. And we're about to give away the potential of our soft technology before we even know fully what it means to be human. And we have case histories throughout time. We'll share a couple that show what it means to live our divinity. First of all, does that make sense what I'm saying about the human technology?
It makes total sense. It also brings up one more idea, but I don't want to take us too much off track here, which is it's on track. But when you talk about also things like global coherence and 9/11 and us emitting back into the field and us as the great creators, if you take those 8 billion individuals and that voltage potential and that energy and that ability to create light and put light, which is information, into the field, wow, could we change our existence like that
We
if
change
we
the world,
wanted
change our
to?
lives. You know that the Nobel Prize in Science, I think it was 2023 or it may have been 2022. It was right after COVID. The Nobel Prize in Science went to the scientists that confirmed the principle of entanglement. Entanglement is the principle in quantum physics that says everything is connected on a very primal level, a very deep level. And that connection is like it's nature's internet of all things. The internet that we built mimics what we already do in our lives. The blockchain that we built mimics what we already do in our DNA. The vaccines that we are taking and we have for the last 100 years have different platforms, but they mimic what nature already does in our bodies. We're engineering outside of ourselves the technology that mimics what we already do, except in many cases we do it better. So let me give you, this is amazing. So
Yeah.
there's something called Moore's law in computing physics. Moore's law says that about every 2 years we double the capacity on a computer chip and on a microprocessor, and that we can only do that so long and we'll reach a limit. Well, we have now reached that limit. So when we talk about, and I say this to young kids in the audience who are taught to worship that the computer chip and AI are the gods of our future.
Yeah.
So, and I show them this. I say, okay, is a computer chip fast? Absolutely. Is it efficient? Absolutely efficient. Is it scalable? So you are always limited on a computer chip. It will never function beyond what the physics of the stuff it's made of allow. Silicon
Yeah.
chip, those atoms that make the silicon, they're going to be the same space apart. Information can only move so fast. So is it fast? Yes. Efficient? Yes. Is it scalable? Its scalability is finite. There's a limit.
Yeah.
Now, human neurons. This is where it gets really interesting. Every time scientists push a neuron to the edge of what they believe is its limit, its capacity, here's what separates a neuron from a computer chip. We do what humans do. We morph and we adapt to the new conditions and open up an entire new vista of information processing. And we do it again and again and again. The human neuron, what is the top end of a human neuron? We don't know, because every time we think we find it, it opens a new possibility. Now, Stanford University and did a really interesting study where they compared the human brain to a microprocessor. And the way they did that was they compared the synapses of the human brain to the transistors on the processor. And interestingly, we have about the same number of synapses in the average brain that there are transistors on our most advanced chips. And what they found was that the bottom line of the whole study was that the human brain is 100-fold more efficient than the microprocessors are. And part of the reason for that is because the human brain triages information and breaks it down, processes it different ways, brings it back together. And every time we reach a limit, the neurons morph to that limit. The point is that we meet and even exceed the capabilities of many of the technologies that we're being encouraged to replace our bodies with.
Yeah. And I know that you go on to also talk about that we also function in more dimensions that are known, and I would guess more dimensions that are not known at this point. So it's not even just about the number that we're talking about.
No, it's not. So what does that mean in practical terms? Practical aspects of human divinity. There's a story I tell in the book. An Australian serviceman serving in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He and his buddies are in a convoy, routine reconnaissance one day. His wife and his mother are in Brisbane, Australia, and they began to have a feeling that he's in trouble.
Yeah.
And they begin to pray
Yeah.
about his safety. And they call his commanding officer, and his commanding officer says, "Hey, they're just out on routine patrol. No big deal, nothing to worry about." Later that night, the serviceman called his family, his mom and his wife, and his kids were there on Skype. They used to have a nightly Skype call. And he shared what had happened. Their convoy, the vehicle in front of him was hit with an IED, a roadside bomb. The force of the blast threw him out of his vehicle, and he survived. The vehicle in front of him was on fire. His buddy was in that. He ran into that fire. He pulled his buddy and the other guys out. He saved all of them. And the point of the story is, how would his mom and his wife know in Brisbane, Australia, that something was happening to him, that he was in trouble before his commanding officer even knows? And we all have heard this. These are anecdotal stories of deep intuition that are an expression of human divinity. Deep intuition, all knowing. There was a journal of complementary and alternative medicine.
Yeah.
Came out a few years ago. It's a peer-reviewed journal. And I didn't know I was going to do this, so I'm going to paraphrase from memory.
Yeah.
But what the article says is that the human heart is now documented with the ability to connect with a field of energy and information that is not bound by the limits of time and space. Now
Amen.
think about that. We have an organ in our bodies that is not limited by the laws of physics as we know them today.
Mhm.
And that's why a prayer in our living room doesn't have to navigate across oceans and over mountains to get to our loved ones. It's already there, because the entanglement that we just talked about is a quantum principle. It's beyond the laws of classical physics. And this is an example of that is divinity. A computer chip can't do that. A computer chip can't tune into and dynamically shift to these kinds of information in the field. A computer chip can't forgive. A computer chip can't love. A computer chip right now doesn't have the ability for empathy and sympathy. And honestly, most scientists don't want that because they see it as a flaw in our design. I see it as a gift
Ooh,
that separates us from all other forms of life.
I want to get to the Great Reset, but that begets a question, and I've had on many times, not in the last couple of years, but many times, Mo Gaudat, who is one of the top engineers behind everything going on with AI at Google as well. Before he stepped back and started raising the red alert, um, is AI being entrained or being? Well, I understand a little bit about how it works. Is it being trained out of AI to have care or compassion or empathy or emotion? Because at some point, when we're talking singularity, when is consciousness and AI? Because if everything is consciousness, then nothing is not. When does it reach that level of awakening? And what's been trained or entrained in or out of it?
Well, this is the thing about AI. A lot of people don't understand that AI is efficient and it can solve some really, really deep problems very quickly. For example, AI, they're using AI now to scour the databases of indigenous plants to find compounds to address different kinds of cancer. It would take a human, lifetimes to do that, and it's able to do it very, very quickly. AI is only possible because of an algorithm. And the algorithm is written typically by humans. And the algorithm, consciously or subconsciously, will reflect the human bias.
Which is a little scary.
Well, and then the rest of this is when the AI wants to gather information, it will go onto the World Wide Web to gather the information that's been digitized.
Yep.
We are living a time where we are being deceived and misled with incomplete, either disinformation or misinformation altogether. That misinformation becomes part of what the AI picks up to answer our questions. The perfect example, I asked an AI, I was doing an experiment, and um, I asked the AI what was the cause of the warming that we're seeing right now.
Yep.
And the AI came back and said that the language that it used was the language that has been used by politicians. It said the science is settled, that climate change is the product of humans using fossil fuels. All right. First of all, science is never settled. And the moment somebody tells you science is settled, that's a red flag, because science is designed to be constantly updated with new information. It is a living body of information. It's not static. Secondly, we could do a whole program on this, Michael. The best science of the modern world is showing us that high levels of CO2 do not necessarily correlate to temperature. All right. We can look, as a geologist, I've seen this. You look into the past, and there are times in our geologic history, our CO2 levels are only about 420 parts per million. All right. Is it high for the last 10 years? Yes. High for the last 50 years? Yes. High for the last 100 years? Absolutely. Is it the highest we've ever had? No. You go back into the Jurassic and the Cretaceous periods, CO2 levels, 1,000 parts per million, 2,000 parts per million. Earth was green. Earth was lush. The sea levels were higher. So it's a problem if you have built believing that climate is static and will never change. If you've got a high rise 10 feet from the ocean, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
But life thrives. The point is life thrives. And then you look at the records, and there are times when CO2 was 2,000 parts per million, but the temperatures were low. And there are also times, and I've got videos on this on my website, people can go to it. You can look at times when the CO2 level was low and the temperatures were high. Uh, and the point is that the correlation isn't really there, but because that's the narrative that's being driven for political reasons, the AI picked that up as the answer. So now I went back a few weeks later and I asked the same question again, and the AI changed its answer. It was still wrong, but it was not as wrong. it said that it said there are other factors. Just for our listeners that may not be familiar with this, the ice cores in Antarctica very clearly are showing. You go back 420,000 years is how far the ice cores, Vostok, for example, the Vostok cores over Vostok Lake in Antarctica. They very clearly show the temperatures rise before the CO2 levels rise. If the CO2 is causing the warming, they would rise first, and they don't. What the data also shows is right now, the warming in our oceans is coming from underneath, not on top. If it was the atmosphere warmed down, it's coming from the bottom up. The glaciers are melting. They are melting. Climate change is a fact, and the glaciers are melting from the bottom up, not from the top down. NASA released a paper, and I've got this referenced in the new book, by the way, that the rapid increase in CO2 that we're seeing right now is coming from the oceans, not from humans. It's called the outgassing. So the oceans are holding the CO2. Well, basic physics. Colder temperatures will hold more gas in the water. When water is warmed, the gases are released. That's called outgassing. The oceans are warming, and they're warming from underneath. And as they warm, they're releasing the CO2 into the atmosphere. We've seen this before. It happens on a cyclic basis. It's being driven by changes in the mantle and the core of the Earth that a lot of people don't want to talk about, that are being driven by cosmological events that a lot of people don't want to talk about because it doesn't fit the narrative. But I've got entire videos. I just want people to know that the AI can only give us what it is that we've given it to work with. And it's drawing upon the misinformation that we are programming to ourselves.
So let's go from there. I will say, and you've said it before, this doesn't mean we keep burning fossil fuels. It's
Absolutely
understanding
not.
there's
Absolutely
procession,
not.
there's so much more going on. There's a central sun. It goes way outside of the talk
Well,
for
so
today.
let me follow up on that. We need
Okay.
to stop burning fossil fuels for other reasons. And we've had the technology to do this for over 70 years. We have had the technology for clean, green, sustainable energy
Yeah.
that cannot be weaponized. It can't be made into a nuclear weapon. It can't melt down like a Fukushima reactor. It's in the soil of almost every nation. It is easy to access. The waste becomes the new fuel. It sounds like a perfect base load energy. We discovered it during the Manhattan Project when they were going through the periodic table.
Yeah.
They didn't go with this because they wanted the uranium. They needed plutonium for nuclear reactors and bombs. That comes from uranium. So we went with uranium rather than element number 90, which is called thorium. And if you look it up, what Wiki will tell you is that it is theoretical, and it is not, because we had active thorium electricity, thorium-based electrical plants in our country in the 1970s.
Yeah.
We had them in China, we had them in Russia, and they were shut down. And one of those was Fort St. Vrain near Fort Collins, Colorado. And I was going to school at CSU when that power plant was up and running. It was a thorium. It's called molten salt reactor, MSR. So the point is that we have these other technologies, and if we were serious about weaning ourselves from fossil fuels, we would go forward with these other technologies.
Thank you. And I didn't know you were a CSU graduate as well.
I did graduate. I went
Oh,
to
okay.
CSU. I was at FIT in
Yep.
Melbourne, Florida,
Yep.
ocean sciences, marine geology. I
Yep.
transferred terrestrial geology to Colorado State, and it was in the 70s. And it happened to be during the time that the oil was cut off to the west
Yep.
from Saudi Arabia and from the Middle East. And I happen to have an unusual expertise but, of geology, subsurface mapping, and computer science. And that was rare at that time. And so I was hired in the industry before I had my degree. And then I finished my degree by going nights. And the work I was doing, I got college credit for the work in the industry that I was doing. And I got my degree actually while I was working in the energy industry at that time. We work in North Slope, Alaska. It was Prudhoe Bay, North Slope, Alaska.
Wow. Very cool. So take us from there, and then I'm going to bring us home with some positives here. The Great Reset, the global agenda. What's this all mean, and then what do we do as individuals so that 2030, as the agenda is desiring it to be, never is.
I think it's all good news because it's forcing us to come to terms and perhaps a deeper appreciation for our humanness. And that's the intent of this book, to develop a deeper appreciation and maybe even a step further, maybe even a sense of pride. I'm proud to be a human, and I hope to elicit that from my readers. What you call the Great Reset, we've already talked about. This is the vision of the WEF, World Economic Forum. It was founded in 1971 as a think tank. They have every right to do that. Every year they get together at Davos, big ideas, no big deal, until 2019. They couldn't get anywhere with those ideas. At the same time, the United Nations had developed what was called the Sustainable Development Goals for the year 2030, UN SDG 2030.
Yeah.
And they are having problems getting any traction as well. And the two organizations believed that there was so much synergy that they should work together. And they signed a formal agreement in 2019. So the UN that we fund and that we are legally bound in some respects when it comes to the WHO and some of these other organizations,
Mm-hmm.
legally bound. The UN now is the implementation arm for the ideas coming from the WEF. And those ideas are encapsulated in what you just mentioned as the Great Reset. The Great Reset is called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It is the digitization of our planet, all of our planet's resources, all of our planet's life, including human resources, including human life, into a massive database run by a massive artificial intelligence that determines what we consume and where we travel and how we travel and what we think and how we think. And it's only possible if we accept the technology into our bodies, or another way of saying that, if we relinquish our divinity. We cannot keep our divinity in the presence of the technology in our bodies. So this is, and I just want to go back. When we talk about a battle between good and evil,
Yeah.
the old idea of a battle is that there are opposing forces and that there has to be a fight. That's the idea of a battle. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about something more on a deeply spiritual level. We don't want to win this battle. We want to triumph in the battle. And the way we triumph is by living our divinity. The goal of the evil is to deny our divinity. The way we triumph is by living the best version of ourselves, by loving without fear, by freely imagining and innovating and creating and sharing what we innovate and create. And anything that denies us that ability is a form of evil. So you look at what's happening social media. There are efforts now to prevent us from openly sharing ideas and our innovations. That is a form of evil. There are processes that are preventing us from healing our own bodies. They want to keep us sick. Some, not everyone, but there has been a movement. I mean, when McDonald's was founded, if you're going to have a global fast food network, it could have been healthy fast food, but it wasn't. And the same with others. So other forms of fast food and things like that. So that's why I wanted to do this early on. The benchmark, anything that veils or denies us access to our divinity is a form of evil. And it's so deceptive because these are coming, and I'm not saying everyone who is perpetuating this knows what we're talking about. Evil, there's ultimate evil,
Yeah.
the darkest of the dark. And then there are layers of pawns who have a propensity for the weaknesses that allow them to perpetuate the evil. So if they have a weakness of greed, then those leaders,
Yeah.
politicians, entertainers, whoever, scientists, whoever it is, religious leaders, if they have a propensity for greed, then they will fall into systems that support their greed. They are perpetuating the evil. I'm not saying that they are aware of it, that they're conscious of it, or if they are easily influenced, if they have low self-esteem and they need validation from the world around them, maybe through the entertainment industry or the music industry, they will become susceptible and they're perpetuating evil. I'm not saying every one of them knows it. So there are layers. And our part of our job, I think, Michael, is to be discerning, to discern, not to be angry about it,
Yeah.
not
Well,
revenge
that's
and
the
not
opposite.
hate. Well, so this is the thing. We're going to get through these 5 years. So we're going to all get through it. And you and I, let's have a reunion, a 5-year
Oh, you got it.
reunion in 2031. But here's the thing: we're going to get through it.
In person, Greg. In person, you and me.
I would love that. I'll come down to Florida and visit you. We're going to get through this. But here's the thing, and this is what I think is so important. What have we become in the process of everything that we have been exposed to? Have we allowed ourselves, have we allowed the events of the world to drive us to the most primal instincts of fear or hate or rage? This last election is a perfect example.
Mhm.
And I know people, I have friends that have allowed their hate for one individual to blind them to all the good and beautiful things that are possible in the world, because all of their energy, their emotional, psychic, spiritual energy has been intentionally directed through media manipulation to a form of hate. So they have succumbed to that hate. They can heal that in a heartbeat, but that has to be a choice. You have to choose to move beyond the hate. So the question is, what do we become in the presence of what the world brings to our doorstep? And everybody has to answer that for themselves. But knowing that this fundamental battle is playing out, and we're all casualties to some degree of the forces of good and evil, we can discern, and then we get to choose. And it all comes down to love. And here's the good news: you don't have to know anything that we just talked about. Hi,
Speaking
there's
of
love.
love,
There's love.
this is pure love right here.
I
Coming
know,
to
I
see
see
you,
that.
saying hi.
I said, well, she didn't just walk out by herself, did she? Is there somebody else right there with you?
There's a mama bear who
That's what I thought. Hi, Mama
was
Bear.
on no, she's no, mama bear's inside. She opened the door like on cue and sent us pure love.
I love that.
You
Well,
want to go
Michael, I have
down?
to
You
say,
cold?
you
Okay.
make beautiful babies, my brother.
I cannot
Well,
argue with this.
this is what I want to leave our viewers with. We covered a lot of ground because everyone learns differently. Everyone learns differently. And if someone needs a reason to think differently about themselves, we've shared some reasons in this podcast. The book is full of those reasons. But really, it comes down to love. And the question we're asking ourselves every day is do we love ourselves enough? Or to make it personal,
Yeah.
do I love myself enough to embrace the deep truth of what it means to be human and the responsibility that comes with our divinity? Do we love ourselves enough to accept that?
Yeah.
And the answer is not something that you say verbally. It's how we live our lives every day, because every moment of every day, we either affirm or deny life in our bodies through the way that we speak to other people, the words we use, the way we allow them to speak to us, how we nourish our bodies, the food that we choose. I'm not saying every day is going to be the healthiest day, but we do the best we can. Every day we make that choice. And so it's becoming conscious of that choice is how we live our divinity. And in that way, we triumph in this ancient battle without fighting. By living the best version of ourselves, we triumph by embracing the deep truth of our humanness. So that is the essence of what the book is all about, and the hope that we do have a deeper appreciation for what it means to be human when the reader closes that, or it's available in audio. I went into the studio.
Yeah.
It took me 3 days, and I personally read every single
Thank you.
word. Nobody else is doing it. And some people like audio, when they're driving cross country or
Yeah.
doing
I
a
can't
workout
believe
or
you did that
whatever.
in only 3 days. I cannot believe you did that
Well,
in only
it
three
was
days.
3 very long days, and it took 3 days because my voice would give out by the end of the day. But
Yep.
it was 3 days, and my publishers, Hay House,
Yep.
they just let me know that the audio is available as well. So the book and audio are available to hold in your hands on January 28th, but they're available
Yep.
for pre-purchase right now, pre-release purchase. And right now I think they're going to sell out. The first print run is going to sell out, and that's awesome. That's awesome.
That's beautiful. And so,
Yeah.
can you share with us your website as well?
Sure. My website is just my name, Gregg,
Yep.
Gregg, two G's,
Yep.
Braden, GreggBraden.com. My mom put two G's on my name intentionally because I'm not a Gregory.
Yep.
One G is short for Gregory. Two G's is plain old Gregg. So I'm just a Gregg. Or you can go to Amazon. You can go to Amazon and pre-purchase the book as well. It's out there. It's a
And
hardback.
yep.
Yeah.
Pure human.
Pure human, the hidden truth of our divinity, power, and destiny. And I believe we didn't talk about destiny, but I believe it is our destiny to live our divinity to the greatest capacity possible.
So, last two questions. First off, would you agree with the statement, if everything is God, then nothing is not? And if so, does this help us? Does this process, does this even this great reset that is being attempted right now help us to awaken to who and what we are? Help us to recognize our divinity and to, we'll call it ascend upwards, whatever that means.
Some people learn better, Michael, by giving their power away to others. They need to give their power away before they recognize what it is that they've lost.
Yeah.
And this movement is akin to that, and it can be a catalyst. We could have this conversation at any time about some time in the future. The point of this, and there's a sense of what I call gentle urgency.
Okay.
The gentle urgency is that powers that be have a timeline. They're looking at 2030 to change our world, to change our lives. The gentle nature is that we have all the time we need to claim our divinity. And if we're going to do it, now is the time. Now is the time to live what it means to be fully human. And I think these events are probably pushing people as a catalyst, accelerating their growth, their awareness. I may not have written this book if I didn't feel that we needed to say something and say it sooner than later. And by the way, I just wanted to share something. This is really interesting. My publisher was Hay House.
Yeah.
And when I first proposed this book, I had a lot of pushback on the title and the content.
Yeah.
And something happened. And in May of this year,
Yeah.
there was a 180. And not only did they want the book, they wanted it sooner than later. And I so
Cool.
appreciate their openness because it's different. It's a different kind of spirituality. It's not
Yeah.
about mediumship and a deck of cards to help us, divinate our days.
Yeah.
It's not about chakras and auras and those are all good. That's a form of growth. Everyone learns differently. But all of a sudden they want this, and then they fast track the book. So I turned in the manuscript in August. I had the
Yeah.
page proofs in September. The book went to the printer, and the audio was made in October, and it's in the warehouse right now. It's in the warehouse. That's less than 6 months they turned this around.
That's crazy.
And that tells me that there is a divine force that is pushing us to come to terms with the truth of who we are, our divinity, our power, our love, and what's possible in this world. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for all of us.
You just may have answered my last question, which is what brings you right now the greatest hope?
The greatest hope is, I think, the more that I explored and researched to write the book, the deeper appreciation and the greater my awe for what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And I think the greatest hope is that we awaken to that possibility before we give it away forever to technology. And I believe that we are, because Michael, I want to thank you. Your podcast is a hub for a community that you've grown, and there are other hubs out there and communities more important than ever right now. We need community, we need family, we need babies. Our planet, the fertility rate is fallen off a cliff. And if that doesn't change around, we'll peak in 2050. And after that, the replacement rate is 2.1 babies per female of
Yeah.
childbearing age. And we are well below that 2.1 replacement rate right now as a planet.
What would that mean? So there are people who are going to say, though, but isn't that good for the earth?
That is a whole conversation that we can have. And what I can tell you right now is not necessarily. Um, we have all the food we need already to feed every mouth of every child, woman, and man. It's not a lack of food. It's a lack of leadership that makes it a priority to get that food to our brothers and sisters that need it. We have the resources to raise the standard of living of every human on the face of the earth without damaging the earth. We have had that for 70 years. Greed has kept it from our fingertips. Greed is what has prevented it from taking root in our lives today. We are not overpopulated. There was a book in 72 called The Population Bomb. Paul Ehrlich wrote that. And many people have that stuck in their minds that there are too many people. There are only too many people if you're trying to control the masses and you're trying to control the resources. But there are forms of government and there are ways of thinking that allow a higher standard of living without damaging the earth and the release of human creativity, innovation, imagination, and divinity to make this the most beautiful world in reality that we know is possible in our hearts. It has to begin with human divinity.
And that gets back to, we'll leave this for another day, Gene Roddenberry's vision for the future of humanity and the future of all civilizations, leading from the heart, out of a place of creativity, out of a place of oneness, of working together and seeing what is possible rather than working one against the other in a land of scarcity.
I couldn't agree more. I look forward to that conversation, Michael. So I want to thank you for sharing me with your community, sharing I hope your daughter stays in the podcast. Thank you for sharing her as well.
Absolutely.
Because I saw her briefly last time. She's growing. She is really growing, man. And I hope you stay nice and bundled up there in the chilly temperatures of South Florida.
What can you say?
I love you, brother Michael. I'm going to say that. And thank you for all you do to make this world a better place.
And you as well, Greg. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, stay warm, of course. Recognize that you are the divine, pure human. You. And above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! How does it get any better than this? How does it get any better than this? I'm hopeful. I'm positive. I have Hannah Barron dancing behind me who's going, it's too cold to be out here right now. I see only powerful, positive possibilities. It's what I teach in the School of Mystics. In fact, come join us. Link down below. It's what I teach every week, is how to come to our true, divine, immortal self. I was like, immoral self? No, immortal self. That's who and what you are. You're a divine, immortal, energetic being, having the most amazing human experience as that energetic being. That's what we're talking about. Of course, come to our School of Mystics. I'll teach you even more about that. Of course, pick up Pure Human. Of course, learn automatic writing so that you can communicate with your higher self, with your higher team. Learn how to live at this higher level, at this level of divination. And of course, if you simply want to bring your energy up on a daily basis, link down below, go to dailywoohoo.com, and I will help bring your energy up each and every day as you plug back into that greatest version of yourself. Here's a link to the next amazing show. Love you so much, and keep on shining bright. Woohoo! How does it get any better than this? Lots of love.